Welcome to our panel. We are the Hope, War, and Revolution panel, so like no pressure, guys. We're going to be planning on doing 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A, so maybe a little more than half of this panel around that after we talk a little bit. So who's on this panel? I'm going to go down my line so that we don't get all tangled. But let's start with Miss Danielle. Who are you?
I'm Danielle Paige. I wrote the Dorothy Must Die books, which are here. See, I went upstairs and got them. And Ceilings No. And my latest is Mirror Tiebreaker, and now I'm doing an Archie Comics. It's Super Teen, which is adorable. So I write a lot of different stuff.
You're not busy at all.
No, totally fine.
Isabel, what's going on with you?
Hello, I'm Isabel Ibañez. I'm the author of Woven in Moonlight, and it just came out in January. Are we saying what the book is about, or should I?
You can if you'd like.
Okay, so it's about a decoy condesa, and which means countess in Spanish. And she infiltrates this corrupt government and sends coded messages back to the rebels through her magical weaving.
Wow, love that.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds good.
Yeah. The next book is a companion to Woven in Moonlight. It comes out January 26th, and it takes place in a jungle inspired by the Bolivian Amazon. So it's kind of like an Indiana Jones survival story.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. Sorry.
How dare you speak out of turn? Okay, so next for me would be Victoria. The other Victoria on the page.
It's like you're calling on yourself.
Yeah, I can see this is going to get confusing already. So I'm Victoria Lee, and I'm the author of The Fever King and The Electric Air, which just came out in March. So the books are essentially about this activist kid who develops a magic power over technology after surviving this deadly virus, and he gets recruited to join this magic military training program and has to work with the same government he hates to both master his magic, but also to try and like have a political coup and bring the government down from the inside.
Governments you hate. Who can relate to that?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Jordan, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. My name is Jordan Ifueko, and I'm going to turn off my background so you can see my book. I'm the author of Raybearer, which was actually supposed to come out like a week ago, but they moved it because of the virus to August 18th. So you can still pre-order this. You can read the first chapter on Entertainment Weekly. And I'm gonna go back to my fun, pretty background. Nope, that's Tiana, I'm sorry. This is Tiana.
Oh, but it's
this is my book. Yeah. Raybearer is about a global magical empire ruled by a dynasty that's loosely based on the Yoruba of West Africa, even though there are many, many different cultures represented in this book. The premise is that it's an emperor ruling this kingdom, and he's rumored to be divine because for every person he anoints to his council of 11, he becomes immune to one kind of death until he's immune to all deaths except old age. The catch is anybody he anoints to this council can still kill him. So if I anointed Hafsah, I'd become like immune to drowning, but Hafsah could still drown me. If I anointed one of the Victorias, I'd become immune to poison, but you guys could still poison me, etc. So they anoint this council while they're children, so they grow to love the future emperor and never betray him. And the main character is Tarisai, who is a young girl chosen by her mother to be a plant on the council to kill the future emperor. So she's supposed to betray him.
That was a really good sketch. Like, okay, let's go.
So that's Raybearer.
And Hafsah, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm Hafsah Faizal, and I am the author of We Hunt the Flame. This released last year, which feels forever ago. And it's a YA fantasy set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, where a girl goes to this villainous island where she has to hunt down a lost artifact that can save her dying world. And at the same time, the second protagonist, who is the Prince of Death and an assassin, is sent on a similar mission to find her, kill her, and steal the artifact for his autocratic father, the Sultan. But of course, when their paths cross, that's not exactly what happens. And so they might have to join forces to defeat this ancient evil that's brewing.
Wow, that's great.
and flirt, you know.
Yeah.
And me. I knew it was. Hi, I am Victoria Aveyard. I am moderating this panel. I am the author of the Red Queen series, which is a book about a world divided by the color of blood. And superhumans essentially oppress everyone who is a normal human. The series follows a young girl who discovers that even though she is normal, she also has superhuman abilities. And I'm also the author of a new series that I can't really talk about, but I'll around as we do this. So let's jump right in. First of all, relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw. Every time someone reminds me to do that, I'm like, oh my God, I was like hunching my shoulders. It helps me feel a little bit better. But how are you guys doing? Is everyone like, are we acclimatized to what's going on? Are we just, every day is survival mode? Do you have a new core routine?
I look for toilet paper every day. It's very important. No, I feel like it's kind of a mix. A few minutes ago, I was at like pulling weeds in the yard, and then I took a shower, and then I'm gonna write for the rest of the day. After in between y'all stuff, and then other days it's like we really need to find something on Amazon that we're missing, and I will spend 2 hours. Like I found a dairy that will deliver to us out on the. I swear to God, we get like fresh meat and fresh cow. Like we get like eggs and stuff. It's amazing. And that was my total accomplishment for the day, like last week. And I was so proud. So it's like kind of a mix of things.
Little incremental, like I did it. And
yes. And then I watch the stupid press conference every day.
You
and I watch the Cuomo one in the morning and the bad one at night.
Okay, I was gonna say you're made of tougher stuff than me, woman. Jeez.
I want to know.
No, this is good for you. Seriously.
Yeah. All right, Hafsah, how are you doing? What's your number one thing that you're focusing on right now?
Well, I'm very lucky to be on deadline, which is not something I thought I'd say. So like having my book to like bury myself into every day helps. Like I'd pay a little bit of attention to the news, and then I'm like, okay, this is it. I can't take any more. Time to write.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I am also on deadline, and it's somehow a blessing.
I'm also on deadline.
Baking a lot.
18.
Has anyone else been eating?
It seems like we're always kind of on deadline, like even if
you're I think I'm always on deadline.
Jordan, how are you keeping up?
I'm doing much better. Having like my whole tour canceled for my debut novel was a shock, but I'm lucky enough that I still have a release date. That's still a big deal. It's funny. I think I've finally gotten to the humor stage of all of this. Like everything seems like a precious resource that comes from the outside world now, right? So I've been joking with my husband about how like when he brings things home, I feel like a peasant wife just like over impressed by what her husband brought home from the fair. Like he brought me home my first chai tea latte from Starbucks in like almost 2 months. And I was like, husband, how could you? You brought me a boon. Like it's hilarious because everything else we try and make from what we have already, right? We try only to leave the house once every 2 weeks. So yeah, we have so much to be grateful for. And I think I'm personally most curious for what things are gone forever now. Like I hope we're done with handshakes, frankly. Like yeah. We can curtsy, we can do something else. Just
Victoria, how are things with you? Where are you right now?
I am in rural Pennsylvania in the worst town in the entire world. But I did find out yesterday that I'm probably moving to New York this summer. So now I'm like a light at the end of the quarantine tunnel. Otherwise, like, I don't know, I'm on deadline. So like my edits for Less Than Inventions, which is my 2021 book, are due on May 18th. And I'm just trying to focus on that.
Yeah, hang in there. And Isabel, are you on deadline? Are you, baking like the rest of you?
Yes, I'm a horrible baker, and I've decided that I'm going to conquer this. I will get better. So I tried cinnamon rolls, and they were edible, but they were not delicious. So I will try again.
I like that.
Yeah. And what I'm really doing right now is doing a lot of designing. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but I got to design the cover for Woven in Moonlight, and my publisher hired me to design the cover. Oh, and I didn't show.
Great. I love it.
So I've been I've been finishing up the design for Written in Starlight, and I love it. So that's what I've been doing.
That's cool.
Art.
Your publisher is lucky as hell. Oh God. Yeah, I didn't show my book. Here's my book.
Yeah.
I can't show the other one because I don't have a cover. Well, we have somewhat of a cover, but we can't show it. It's not real. So let's talk about this panel. It's called Hope, War, and Revolution, which is somewhat relevant. I know that a lot of you guys have specific inspiration, specific bits of history, war, revolution, struggle, just in general. So I was curious to know what those were. Let's start with Isabel.
Hi. So Woven in Moonlight was directly inspired by the political climate in Bolivia. It's actually been kind of scary for about 3 years, and all of my family is in Bolivia. And when you have someone who's in a leadership position who has infiltrated many different sectors, this person has changed the Constitution to remain in power and continually changing the Constitution. And so it's been very scary. So I've had a lot of family protesting and putting their lives in danger to try and fix the situation, and I can't be there. So when I was writing Woven in Moonlight, I kind of felt like I was writing my own sign, my own banner of protest. And my mom would send me pictures of her son and what she was doing out on the street, and it just really inspired me. So the whole book has different plot points that are inspired by events that have actually happened in Bolivia during this revolution, because it's ongoing.
Well, that's a lot. And I'm sure it's helpful psychologically to be able to work through this.
Yes. Oh yeah. I felt like I was doing something. I felt like it feels really helpless sometimes to be here, and then and you just want to make sure that your family is okay. And so being able to write and have some kind of control was really helpful, for sure.
Yeah, I totally believe that.
Yeah.
Jordan, also, by the way, I was just glancing at the Q&As to get an idea of how many we've got. We've got a ton already. Jordan, Alyssa Watson already wants to know where can you read the first chapter? She needs it right now.
Oh, you can read the first chapter at Entertainment Weekly. If you just Google Ray Bearer, it's like Ring Bearer, but with Ray instead of ring. Entertainment Weekly, it should come up. Also, I think my publisher just released the second and third chapter. I think if you go to Pique, Pique, on Twitter or on their website, they should have links to those 2 other chapters. So
that's great. I'm glad they're getting out front too and pushing as much as they can before it comes out. Because
yeah, the book has been really great.
Very excited for this book, and now they're being told wait 3 months, which so
yeah, it's a little surreal.
But, did you have any specific inspirations towards your novel?
Yes, I have quite a few. So I was actually homeschooled until high school. And then I actually attended a very tiny private school. My graduating class was only 17 people. And we were this tight-knit group of friends who just did everything together. And so on 2 fronts, I really liked our group, and it was my first time being part of a group of teenagers, really. And so because it was like this preppy school and we'd debate and we'd take ourselves way too seriously, oh my gosh, guys, I think we all thought that someday we would change the world. And so this story actually started in high school, the earliest drafts of it, about this council of children who are being groomed to raise an empire. But the funny thing is, because this is the book I learned to write a book on, I wrote other things in the meantime, but I kept writing this story over and over again from age 13 to 25. I learned, I just took a lot of my rose-colored glasses off in terms of empires and good righteous kingdoms and imperialism and things like that. Just stuff you take for granted about living in the United States. You realize obviously there are some corrupt things you always, at least a Black person knows about, like slavery and things like that, but you learn even more the extent to which, wealthy nations are built on trampling on other people. And so I grew up with the whole Narnia-esque storytelling thing where it's like, oh, there's the good kingdom, the righteous kings and queens, and you have to defend them from the unknown. And so that's what the story started as. And as I grew up, it turned into this girl who believed that at first, looking under the rocks, looking under, the corners, and realizing that this empire that has both oppressed her and given her a lot of privilege is in fact built on blood, on the sacrifice of other people. So all of that went into forming the world of Eretzar, forming the government. It's interesting going back to Raybearer because I'm in revisions of book 2 right now, and she's grown so much since book 1. It's weird going back into her kind of like naive, like, oh, this is the good and righteous empire. So yeah, those were some of the inspirations for Raybearer.
Wow, that's fantastic. Hafsah, in the questions, there are so many questions about your world building and your inspiration in using Arabic words in your fantasy novel. And that also is one of your inspirations you'd love to talk about, but I personally want to hear about that.
Okay, so what question am I supposed to answer?
So basically, someone was saying they love and adored how you used Arabic words. What was the process of that? How could you manage to include words from different languages whilst keeping the essence of a fantasy story? And what was the choice behind that? I would really love to get that.
I think what I love most about fantasy is how it promises to be an escape from our world when it really isn't. Mm-hmm. It's basically taking so many struggles and hopes and failures and dressing it up in a new setting and a new world, which is basically fascinating in itself, and it's like whole other thing to discuss. Yeah. But when I started writing the book, it was inspired by this back-to-back consumption of Lord of the Rings and The Hunger Games, and my sisters and I were discussing it, and we were like, what if the games were set in a fantasy world? And so I started writing the book, and it was Welsh settings, English, very Eurocentric, because that's what most of the books at the time were. And so I wrote about a third of that book, and it just wasn't sitting right with me, because I was telling myself this is my last attempt to get published, because I had this crazy dream of getting published by the time I was 20, and that didn't exactly work out. So I was 19, and it was like approaching this self-imposed deadline. And so I just scrapped the whole thing and decided I would put together the world's map, because I'm a very visual person, and I like designing and putting things together. And so I started drawing the map for that book. And I realized that it represented the Mediterranean region quite a bit, with you can see it right here, with an island in the middle surrounded by the mainland.
Right.
And so I decided that I could set it in a place that's a lot more familiar to me, and in a place that's represented quite wrongly in media and fiction. And so I didn't want to just have a setting and genies in a lamp and magical carpets and the whole thing that comes with when you think of Arabia. So part of that was incorporating actual language. And so I would find words that were kind of pronounceable to people and try to define them in context, which some people say I succeeded at. Some people say that they need a glossary. But yeah, so I wanted to include the language and the culture. Food, I've always wanted to make someone drool when they read my food description, and I think I succeeded at that too. And clothing and all of that. So I've deviated from the whole struggles and war and all that, but yeah, that's where it came from.
Awesome. That's excellent. Danielle, which one of your books are you going to
I realized I skipped describing the books, by the way. So Dorothy Must Die is the story of another girl who lands in Oz and has to fight an evil Dorothy. And for that book, I just read all the old Wizard of Oz books and incorporated as much as I could from the crazy wars that happened there. And then for my latest book, which is a comic book, it's Mirror Tidebreaker. It's about Aquaman's girlfriend, or I like to flip it and say he's her boyfriend. It was actually I wasn't inspired by war, but more about our time. So in the story, she grows up under the water, and she lives in a colony that is against his colony, so they're rivals, and so she decides to go and kill him in order to get her crown. And when I started writing the book, and he grows up on land, he doesn't know who he is or that he's the heir to the throne, but she meets him and he looks like Jason Momoa, so she falls in love and it gets difficult. But what I wanted to talk about is like the start of the book where she's in Zebel, and I started writing it like just a normal teenager who sneaks out and goes to a party and is having a great time. And then she gets into a fight and has to defend her friend. And instead, I wrote this, I turned it in, and my editor was like, there's something about this book that doesn't feel right. And then I was thinking about what was happening in our world at the time, which was Charleston and the shooting in Florida. And I changed the opening of my book. And I did not incorporate those things, but I incorporated a protest, and I had her sneak out to protest what her country was doing, because that felt right and more real to me. So I think that we all are doing in small ways, like what happens in the real world is kind of instilled in our books.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy to look at, especially with you, when you have such like a backlog, to understand where each little piece came from and who you were at that time.
And you don't think about it when you're doing it. Like I honestly, and then when I went on press tour for it, they're like, yeah, we totally want to talk about the protest things. Like what? Oh wait, yeah, I did that. But it really did come out of the time.
Yeah. I know that was like such a blast from the past. It feels like so much has happened.
Yeah.
Victoria, how are you doing? And what was your main inspiration, at least in terms of, because you definitely have a corrupt government and someone working within it to bring it down. Is that specifically inspired by anything around us right now?
People usually think that it is, because it certainly seems like it is. So like in this story, there's a lot of issues about like terrible policies towards immigration and refugees, but I actually wrote this book like years and years ago, before any of this happened. But in some ways that kind of felt like, I don't know, like originally I had tried to focus the book on thinking about the Holocaust. I'm Jewish, all the characters in the book, or 3 of the main characters are Jewish. And I wanted to focus on, what does it mean to deal with the intersection of like personal trauma, but also intergenerational trauma, and like the legacy of surviving genocide or of surviving oppression, and like how it can be really difficult to deal with the individual traumas that you encounter in your life. Like, so in this book, dealing with childhood abuse or mental illness, while also kind of carrying that legacy in the way that, we have to decide how we're going to reckon with that trauma, and if we're going to weaponize it against ourselves or against other people, or try to dismantle the system. And a big theme throughout the book was history repeating itself, because one of the characters' grandparents survived the Holocaust, and then he survived a massacre against people who use magic. And then now there's all this terrible bigotry against immigrants in the current day of the book. And so then when everything started happening now with the way that our government is and the policies that our government has, no, it wasn't something that I like intended to write in the book to be a criticism of contemporary policy, but it kind of ended up being that anyway. And that does just kind of feel in a little way inevitable, in that like it seems as if people keep trying to find ways to like assert power over others. And I don't know, like on the hope part of the Hope and Revolution, I do hope that like people do end up finding that like ability to like rise up and to organize in their communities and kind of catalyze themselves and other people to fight back. But yeah.
I'm in a similar boat as you, where a lot of people have said, oh, your book's got a little too political, they drew a little too much from what's going on in our government right now. And I had to be like, most of these books, the one that you're highlighting right now, that was written before the 2016 election, and is focusing more on history and the way things tend to repeat, the way that dictators tend to act like each other. So if you are reading a certain contemporary government official in this, you are reading them in all of these other dictators, and that is your problem, not mine. But
tell him, Victoria.
That's my answer. But my new series has, as I've been editing it, I've realized there's a lot of very female anger in that book, and sort of also my serious escape. It's been helping me cope with the last few years, something that bloomed because I needed this window. And my main inspiration, similar to you, Hafsah, was The Lord of the Rings, which I love so much, but I also feel like that story doesn't love me back. I mean, I remember being 11 years old and being like, okay, where's the girl on the Fellowship of
Yeah, where is she?
You know, I'm a straight white girl. If I was having trouble finding myself, they're like, that's bad. So this was, you know, my love letter to, but also attempt to see myself in something and hopefully bring other people who haven't seen themselves as well. We have so many questions, you guys. We've gotten through like one of our panel questions. But there are some that are specifically about hope as well, because that is a big part of this panel. So I was wondering, you know, how we view hope, and is it important to your novels? Is it something that you wanted to highlight, you know, it's darkest before the dawn, but kind of thing? Personally, I think hope is really important to YA, and that is something that people say, oh, YA is this specific genre because of your character's age or because of the way the story plays out. But I think hope is also a huge element of our genre. Let me get the exact question because that was a bit of a ramble. Yeah, so would hope play a large role in your books, or are you not anti-hope, but are you a little bit less inclined to include something there? I know a lot of people like grimdark, but I think YA doesn't do that as much. And also, what's giving you hope right now would be the other end of that question. Isabel, would you like to start?
Sure.
Sorry, I really whiffed on that one.
Okay, so if you know me at all, I do like when things go a little dark, but I am by nature a very kind of fluffy golden retriever type person. So the story, especially in Woven in Moonlight, I did include hope into it. I did, even though as scary as it's gotten in Bolivia, I wrote down an ending that I wanted that would spell out some kind of future where everybody could be seen and heard. And the other thing that I did, and I was just, when you were talking, I kind of realized this, but I made sure that everybody not everybody, but I made sure the cast did not lose themselves just to this fighting, that they had other conversations, that they had their interests. The main character, Jimena, is this weaver, and she loves art and she likes to create, and she takes that time for herself to be able to be who she is before and a part of this revolution. And I think I did that because my hope is that when it all ends, I'm hopeful that people can return to these kind of heart things that they love, that they haven't been able to interact with because they have been fighting, because they have been protesting, and because they've just been really worried and scared. So for sure, I include that message. I think I'll always have it in all of my books because I don't know. I prefer to think of the world that way, you know?
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Victoria, what about you?
Sorry, I am kind of
like batch the roles, like Victoria A, Victoria L.
Yeah, so for me, I'm like Isabel. I definitely like the dark things. I'm not so much the golden retriever. I'm just the darkness. But I do, I don't know, maybe so like not a golden retriever, maybe like a stingray. It's like creepy. Like, everything underwater is creepy to me. So, but no. So I do think that hope is important to have in books, especially in YA literature. And I think there's hope in The Fever King. It often doesn't really feel like it, but the thing that was important for me in terms of how I wanted to portray the hope was making it something that you create yourself, not something that like exists outside of you or outside of your actions or outside of like the steps that you take to try to make things better. So all of the characters in the book are kind of creating their own hope in a very hopeless situation. The villain that they're fighting against is like super OP. Like he is, this is a little spoilery, but like he has mind control and like has almost every magical ability it's possible to have. And so it would be easy to feel hopeless. And I think that's how most people in that society would feel at the prospect of trying to fight against him. But the main character gets so politically involved in rebellion and like being a double agent and trying to find a way to defeat him and to create a new world. And I think that's, for me, what hope is knowing that you're human and knowing that the other person's also human, and that you can't sit around and wait for someone to take action and try to make things better. You kind of have to find the ways in which you can be that person to take those steps, or to like show a way for other people to join you in taking those steps. So yeah, I like hope, but I like super agentic hope.
Great. You guys have really great answers to my like whiffed questions. But Hafsah, how do you interact with hope in your novels? And also, what would your animal be? Because I like that.
This is
Come on, put you on the spot.
that question. I like lions, but I don't know if I'd be a lion. My name means lioness, young lioness in Arabic.
I love that.
So I'll just go with that. Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. So Beyond the Flame is pretty dark, and I think I like dark things. Actually, I do like dark things. So like when you have a dark world, I feel like you need to have something that drives your characters, or they'll just want to flop like the rest of us kind of want to do right now. And so hope is so often a driving factor in the book, because it's like it's abstract and it's still there no matter where you look, and it's something you want to cling to, and it keeps you going. And I think because there's just, no matter what, there's still some good in the world, so much good in the world, and it's something that we want to cling to, and it'll keep us going.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's excellent. Jordan, I feel like we are all just
yeah, but it's funny how complicated of a question that becomes, because I think that there are different points of conflict in my animal. Sorry. Is that one the harder question or the easier question? I don't know. I guess I kind of relate to lions because I have an afro, but those are male lions, so I don't know. It depends. Sometimes I relate a lot to a panda, because they just seem like, I admire how big and strong they are, but like they just are super content to kind of just chill and eat leaves. Yes. Which is how I'd like to think of myself, I guess. Just like I could beat someone off if I had to. Yeah. But instead I'm going to bake more cupcakes. Yeah. So I do like pandas. In terms of hope, it's interesting because one of the main conflicts is actually the trauma we inherit from our ancestors and from our parents in particular. So there's the ancestral conflict in that, like, you know, what if the legacy you have inherited, which is golden, and, you know, the ray bearers, that's what they're called, these people who are destined to rule, like, you know, the sun is like they are, that's the way people see them, as like these divine standards of rightful rule and stuff. What happens when that legacy is tainted, even if most people think it's perfect, if you know deep inside that it's tainted? And so one of the things that Tarisai has to learn is that she has to first acknowledge what she has inherited from her mother in particular, who is an emotionally abusive person because she was abused, and from her ancestors. I'm not going to tell you who her ancestors are because it's kind of a huge spoiler, but yeah, like she has to grapple with, because you know, you can respond to finding out stuff like that two ways. You can say, oh, I'm never going to be like that. I have nothing to do with that. I'm a completely different person than those people who I came from. And then there's the opposite extreme, which is I am destined to be just like my abusive mother. I am destined to be just as entitled and abusive a ruler. And so the hope that Tarisai comes out of, because she goes through both of those phases, is basically accepting herself, the good parts and the bad parts, and realizing that she has the agency to change and decide her own destiny and decide the destiny of the place she's given power over. So I think that it does come to a very hopeful crest in terms of her own self-determination, in terms of whether or not Eretzar can in fact be a just place. That's a question I don't answer all the way, especially not in book 1, and even in book 2, which has more to do with the empire instead of her self-determination. It's just because honestly, that's not a question I have the answer to. I don't know if a place like the United States, for example, or any other imperial country can become that light beacon on a hill when like so much of it was built on oppression and on exploitation. I don't know if it can actually become that, or if it's the kind of thing where eventually you just have to start from the bottom and start over. So I think there is hope in terms of self-determination, and hope in knowing there's fulfillment and striving for the right thing, even if you don't know if that ultimate right thing is attainable.
Danielle, I'm so sorry. I think we're out of time.
Oh, no, okay.
I think it's like 40 minutes, right? Like we cut off like now-ish.
I thought it was 40.
You got a moment. You can take some extra time.
Okay, so I'll make it quick though. So like for me, I think it's too, like within my stories, I typically I maintain hope for the character, but I don't necessarily make the world pretty at the end. So having finished a series, without giving any spoilers, I think hope to me is about finding your agency, finding your tribe, finding a way to deal with the world, and knowing that the world's not going to get 100% better while we're here, but hopefully every generation gets better. Hopefully everything's better, like for us than it is for our foremothers. Like I look at it that way. I look at the kids that are coming up. They have Lord of the Rings, and they also have Red Queen. They also have all of our books that have women in the center of them. They have women of color in the center of them. It's a step forward for all of us. And so that generation of girls can write their own stories thinking it's absolutely normal to have women in the center of them. And for me, that's hope. And every kid that we talk to online and everything that we get to do, it's hope. That's how I look at it. That's
awesome. I'm so glad we had the time to get from you, because that was really lovely. And that is something that is now giving me hope. And I think sometimes, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, and you sort of forget, because this is work for us, and you forget that we're doing this because we love it and because it's our form of connection. It's how we reach out to another person, and we love escapist stuff. We love stories. We love that human element, and to get to give it to someone else, it's the most incredible feeling. I think we all hold up our books now so we can everyone know what we've been talking about, where they can find us, what these look like. But thank you guys so much. I'm so happy I can cross moderating a panel off my list.
Yes.